Oh, that's right. Good afternoon, everybody. Hey, it's me, Ann Eller, right here from the studios, the bunker at WCRS Radio, and I am in good company this afternoon. Very safe here this afternoon because I've got Police Chief TJ Chaudion with us this afternoon. We're going to be talking about all things Greenwood City Police. You know, there is a difference. We've got the city police department and we've got the sheriffs. They work together, but they cover different aspects. So looking forward to having a conversation. It just seems like when everything seems to be going so good and then we have a problem. But he's here to tell us a little bit more about what's been going on. I hope you're going to find this interesting this afternoon. I also hope if you have a question that you call or text 864-332-9355. That's 864-332-9355. And without further ado, here is Police Chief TJ Chaudion. How you doing, Chief?
I'm wonderful, Miss Ann. Thank you so much for having us back on. It's been a while, so I'm glad to be back.
Absolutely. You know, I just have to think back to, I don't remember what year it was. It was before you went overseas, and you were out there putting the, I think it was for the Festival of Discovery Blues Cruise out there on the main road. You were putting the barriers up and everything. And then you left town and went overseas, and then you came back, and now you're the police chief. Yeah. What can we say?
A lot changes over 25 years.
Yeah, has it been that long?
It has been that long.
That's right.
The good thing is I look back at that time, and I had no responsibilities other than me, so it was a lot easier back then than now.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was thinking about. It was a lot easier, and nobody expected much of me because, well, she's just that little radio girl. Anyways, we've got a lot to talk about here today, and I know one of the things that you wanted to talk about here, and then we'll get into some of the other sides of it, is what some of the crime reports. I know a couple of weeks ago in City Council you were talking about it. There'd been an article in the Index Journal. So what would you like to tell us?
So the biggest thing is I like to tell people, because, everybody is always about crime rate stats, and, they're all over the place. Some reports you'll read this, some reports you'll read is totally different. So for our 2024 reports, they just came out, and I presented to council, but this was the first time since we've been tracking through SLED since 2009, we actually seen a reduction in all 8 of our categories, which is murder, aggravated assault, arson, breaking and entering, robbery, motor vehicle thefts, larceny, and sexual battery. So we're very proud of that. It just goes to our officers, being very proactive out on the streets, making those contacts and trying to prevent crime before they start. So we know next year for the 2025 that our murders, of course, are down. I think we had 3 in 2024. We only had 1 last year, so which is great for us. That's well below our average. We usually average about 2.6 or 7 murders a year, so we're getting below that.
And what about this year?
This year we've already had 1. Very unfortunate. But I always tell people always say, I don't understand all these people getting murdered in Greenwood. In reality, I'm like, no, really, there's not that many people that get murdered or shot in Greenwood. However, it does happen, but there's usually something behind it. For example, that murder that we had, we know that they were going there to do a robbery, and I know people post and say, robbery, where's robbery? But, we took 2 kilos of cocaine out of that house, the same house where the shooting happened. So there's always a lot more to the story than usually gets released. Some of it we don't release because we don't want it to interfere with Solicitor David Stumbo's cases and stuff, because they do have a lot of preparation stuff, and you don't want to spread too much stuff out there and people know about the case that might hinder their investigative or prosecutorial stuff.
Right. I hearken to Nancy Guthrie's case out there and how they have, it seems to me in a lot of ways it's been bungled, and yet we don't know what's going on, and it is kind of frustrating.
Oh yeah, and there you have to have that, and even me as a chief, there has to be a balance, right? There has to be a balance between making sure that you protect the case all the way through prosecution, but also you're entitled to make sure that your general public is aware of safety concerns and other concerns that's going on in their area. So you have to weigh that balance. And a lot of times that's a balance for me as the chief. I'm going to tell people, look, this is about the case. This is what happened. This is the reason that we think it happened. Because then it kind of brings the public back down. They don't think, oh, we just got people going out here just doing random crimes. And, and we're not seeing that. We don't see that in Greenwood that often. Does it happen? Yeah, of course. It's like any, we got 78,000 people. Of course, we're going to see some type of crime. But at the same time, I tell people all the time, all my family goes here. So I don't, follow all my kids to Walmart or to the mall or anything like that. And I promise you, if I felt unsafe whatsoever, then I would. But that's just not the real actual consensus of Greenwood and what we're about.
Yeah. So what we have seen a lot of drugs being taken off the streets. What is the status of drugs in Greenwood, South Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, we got them as bad as anybody else. Anyone who says that Greenwood don't have a narcotics problem, I think, would be trying to, kind of pull the mask over somebody's eyes to cover them up, because we see it, on the nightly basis when our officers do traffic stops and they take, paraphernalia off the streets and stuff. So we see a lot of it, and it wasn't long ago that the city had that great big bus where we took the fentanyl machines or the fentanyl press machines out of stock, and we I think we got like so many thousands of pills that were already made, and there was hundreds of thousands of pills that they were going to make with all the different drugs they had. And that's the problem you have, is you just have random people out here mixing this stuff together, and that's why we have so many overdoses. As soon as you have one overdose, you're getting ready to have a bunch of them, because it's like a bad batch coming into town.
Well, my question would be, we must have, if you're talking about thousands of pills, we must have distributors right here in our area.
Yeah, for most of us, I think it's, it's kind of a need, people's always going to sell dope because dope makes so much money, and it's an easy way unless you get caught, and eventually you're going to get caught. So for us, it's always about the money. I mean, when you stop these people and you search these houses and they live in a house that's worth $6,000, it's all run down. The only thing in the house is usually a TV and a mattress, but then you take $60,000 in cash out of the house. It's a money game, and as long as there's money out there to be made, people's going to try it, no matter what it is, whether it's drugs or something else. People are going to take advantage of it.
What is B&E on this list?
Breaking and entering.
Breaking and entering. Yeah. This is still a problem in our area. Yes.
Yeah, we have, I think we went from 202 to 164, and if I'm not mistaken, next year I think that number for 2025 went back up, so I think it's a 169 for 2025. And people, where that gets confusing is as soon as you say breaking and entering, the first thing people think of is those amount of houses that get broke into. In reality, it's not the houses, it's usually the cars, and it's usually people walking around. Some of these kids, and a lot of times it's done by juveniles, but they can walk around 3 neighborhoods and try to get into 60 cars. So once we get that call, then we're out there looking through the neighborhoods, and for every car that they touch or try to get into, that's another break and enter. And even if they just pull the handle and found the doors locked, that's still a charge. So sometimes you have to understand what exactly the crime is to have a better understanding of exactly that is. Most of our burglaries, we don't have a whole lot of commercial burglaries. We have a few, not a whole lot. And then usually our burglaries that happens at people's houses is usually from people they know, but it still goes down as a burglary because the person didn't have a right to enter the house. And that'll come a lot with ex-husbands, ex-wives, ex-girlfriends,
Right.
They used to live there, now they've been evicted and don't live there no more, and they come over there and, for whatever reason, force their way in the house or bust a door or something like that. So then they get a charge of burglary, and that's it's one of the biggest charges you can get, because there's only two charges in South Carolina that carries life in prison. One of them's burglary first degree, and the other one's murder.
Really? I didn't know burglary did.
Burglary first degree.
Why does burglary carry such a big one?
Well, because there's a lot of aspects to it. You know, if you use a weapon or you commit another crime while, kidnapping or something like that goes along that ups it to first degree. But those are the only two charges in South Carolina that carries life in prison.
Wow. Okay. Well, now, I think one of the things that is important to discuss is our young people. We seem to not be able to get a handle. I know you have, but you told me something very amazing that I did not realize, and that we have to send our juveniles to DJJ down there, and it costs us every day that they live there.
Oh yeah, so that's one of the issues that we're having, especially this year. This is the first year that it's went up. Used to we had to pay $50 for them to go down there, $50 a day for them to go down there a day. And last year the House and the Senate in South Carolina passed a bill, and it moved that up. So now it's like $150 a day. So every time we take a juvenile down there, we're paying $150 a day for them to be there.
And we don't have a place here for them.
We don't have a place here for them, especially the ones that, if it's a serious offender, you don't, it still costs the taxpayers $150. The city taxpayers $150 a day for us to put a juvenile down there. The city taxpayers, because we're paying it. So your city taxes are the one that's paying for that. And that can get real expensive real quick. And not only that, the police department's responsible to take them to any type of hearing or doctors or anything like that they have to go to. DJJ requires us to come and get them, take them to whatever that hearing is, and then take them back. And and it's still, you're still paying the $150.
And that's all the way back to Columbia.
And that's all the way back to Columbia. So anytime we put one down there, we have to go get them and bring them back. They have to see a judge within 24 hours. And when we bring them back, most of the time, if it's something serious, the kid will go back. So we have to take the kid back. So it can get expensive real quick. And DJJ's whole thing is we don't have the money to support the system. But to move that to the taxpayers of the cities that's already struggling with the juvenile crime.
Well, here's my question then, because could that influence your decision about whether to take a kid into custody?
Oh, absolutely. If you take if let's say there's a drive-by shooting and it's 3 juveniles, and well, here's a better one. So you pull over a car and it's got 3 juveniles in it, and you pull out 3 guns. Is because they got 3 guns on them, do we need to send them down there to Columbia? Because that's $300, $450 a day for 3 kids to go down there for being in possession of a weapon, which is a serious offense. I mean, it really is. But at the same time, is it worth the taxpayers' money? Now, if they do shootings and robberies or anything like that, of course they're going down there. But it really gets you into, like, if you got a kid that's running away several times, and you keep getting called out there because they're still using your resources. At what point do you say, look, we got to take him down to Columbia, because he's not going to stop running away, or she's not going to stop running away. So where does that fit in? Where does it balance itself out that, okay, this is worth $150 a day for no matter, we don't know how many days, that'd be up to a judge as whether or not they would get out or not. And that's a lot of burden, especially when it starts coming off our budget, because we budget for that in January, but we have no idea how many kids are going to DJJ through the year. So that budget, if you have a shooting and it involves a juvenile and you can send a juvenile down there, that budget starts getting ate up real quick.
Do you know if the House and the Senate have had any pushback? Have you had any discussions with your legislators about about how this is affecting your bottom line?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke to all of our delegates, especially as I'm a member of the South Carolina Chiefs Association, so we do a lot of stuff through them, and we were totally against raising this, but they actually, and I will give them this, they were trying to raise it higher than what they actually did. They were trying to go way higher than what they did, so they did bring it back some, but that's still a lot of money that comes from the taxpayers.
To me, that is unbelievable. I understand the money has to come from somewhere, but it doesn't seem it should have to come from each city municipality.
Yeah. Well, and you imagine, here at Greenwood City, I'm lucky, we got a decent budget. But if you take a town like Ware Shows, 96 Calhoun Falls, and they have a juvenile take a shooting and they have to take them down there, then where's that $150 a day? Well, it's coming from the city, or the county, depending on where it is. But if it's the city of 96 got to figure out how to pay that $150 a day.
Correct.
And that can be, especially for small towns, I mean, it's hard to convince a mayor and council members, hey, we need to send this kid down there because he won't listen to his parents, but we're going to have to pay $150 a day. Most council and mayors are going to say, oh, we can't do that. So it's,
And we set up a barricade in their backyard.
So it plunders the resources. And, and I understand, it's got to be paid for, right? I understand that. The DJ, their facilities they get hammered a lot, especially with juvenile crime going up the way we've seen it in the last 5 or 6 years. Because most of our juvenile crime was something simple like shoplifting or breaking into cars. It wasn't nothing violent, And now we're seeing a lot more of it turn to violence, And it's not violence over, something bad. It's violence over you disrespected me on social media, or you said something about my neighborhood, and for them, it's like they feel like the end result is I'm going to pick up a gun, I'm going to shoot somebody, and a lot of times, unfortunately, because kids are kids, they don't walk up to nobody and shoot them. Usually they shoot into buildings and shoot into houses, and they don't know if the person's in there or not, and we don't know where the bullet's going or who it's going to strike, and that's the real scary part.
That's what happened over here at Kim's Restaurant, right?
Correct.
Yes. Now, as far as that goes, how are we? Do we have gangs here in Greenwood?
Well, yeah, we always have our little homegrown gangs. That's been around since I first started policing. I think it's more. Well, here in the last probably 10 years, we've actually documented it a lot more. So we go through, we got books and we got, documentation of gang members, known gang members, affiliates of gang members. And even though they might take a claim of being with Bloods or being with Crips, most of the time we have the, OG boys,
pseudo gangs.
Yeah, it's always
the pseudo Bloods.
Yeah, it's always a little hometown group of kids that grew up in the same neighborhood, and they take on that, whether it be Bow Lane. And I know people say, well, Bow Lane, that's a rap group. It's also a gang. We've dealt with them many a times, but you start taking into some of those names and how you deal with them, and that's a serious aspect, because then they're looking not only to, usually if they're in a gang, their home life is not good. So now the gang is their home life, and as to continue anything, right, they're going to support themselves. And whether that's, selling drugs or breaking into stuff, they're going to find a way to keep the money flowing with their little group. And unfortunately, it can turn into some real bad experiences. And I really do not feel like most of them even understand the consequences of when they fire that weapon, what it can have.
Until somebody's dead.
Yeah. Because I've been to some shootings and I've seen where one shot went down in front of the porch and one shot went and hit the ceiling of the roof. So I don't know what they were aiming at, what they were shooting, and maybe they were running when they were trying to shoot, but that shows you it's such a wide range. And most of these, it's never like, I always tease my officers, I want to see the little group, whenever we're doing firing, where we're doing all of our tactical stuff, we want to put things in small groups, right? So we know where every bullet, we're going to account for every bullet and where it goes. And boy, it's not like that out here on the streets. Bullets go everywhere. And that's the scary part, because it's like when people always ask me, I don't understand why you're arresting me because I just fired a gun up in the air. Well, that projectile's coming down somewhere. And
well, it's like that case over there at Uptown on the Seaboard, where the girl was sitting in the restaurant, or whatever the name of it is.
Yep.
And she was just sitting there, and he just was mad, right?
Yep.
Because they had kicked him out of the restaurant.
Yep. Had nothing to do with her whatsoever. She just happened to be in there with a friend having a drink, and and he got into it. And whether it was he was shooting at the security officer or shooting at the another guy that he had beef with that was there too, either way, an innocent person lost their life that night.
That's right. And the thing about it, that took two plus years, I think,
to
get
it always takes
to get him convicted. And
and most people don't understand the process, because we send all of our evidence to to SLED. So a lot of times you're waiting on SLED to do all your forensics, all your DNA, all your, everything that we take from a crime scene. We don't have the laboratory here to deal with. We actually have to send it to SLED. So then we're depending on their laboratory to do everything. So that takes a lot of time. And then you also have to set it up because everybody who tested anything at SLED, now they got to come down and testify in the trial to be able to get all that into evidence. So it's a lot more to it than what people usually believe.
Well, and everything is so much more sophisticated today.
Oh yeah, technology, boy, it's something. Technology has, it's some great things, because parents can do stuff like Live 360 and follow their kids, and which I think is wonderful. Because when I was a kid and you were a kid, you just had to be home when the street lights come on. And my parents, and they wasn't bad parents, but they had no clue where I was at or what I was doing.
Oh, so you were bad.
I was just all over the place,
right.
because there was no contact or anything. So I might be at this friend's house, I might be at this friend's house, but we would always be doing something, walking the creeks or fishing or doing something. But there was no way my parents actually knew everything and everywhere I was going. And now it's a little different. Now, a lot of these kids are probably a lot smarter than me, and they probably can show Live 360 there's somewhere there ain't. I don't know about that. I know my wife can tell when I'm at McDonald's drive-thru because she'll text me and say, "What are you doing at McDonald's?" I'm like, "If you don't take Live 360 off my phone." So it can be good and it can be bad. If you're married, it's probably not a good thing.
Well, and I think there is such a variance in parents. We have
Correct.
Parents that are truly parents, I think, are truly concerned, maybe overly concerned
Yes,
in
ma'am.
some aspects. And then on the flip side, one of the things that always gets me is when somebody that's in a political office or in a higher plane says parents know best. Unfortunately, I think for a large part of our society, that is not true.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever been to some of the calls I've been to.
Yeah.
Because some of the calls the parents are some of the leading causes. I mean, there's a lot of these kids, especially the ones that are falling into this repeat cycle, they're coming from broken homes. They're coming from mom's got addiction, dad's not around, or vice versa. So there's a lot of drugs moving in. They live in high poverty area, which unfortunately sees a lot of crime. So that's something they're seeing on a daily basis. So I tell everybody, it starts at home, and I think me and the sheriff have both, I know I've heard him say it at several different talks that we've been at. It always starts at home, and the parents are such a big part of how their child's future is going to turn out. And and people always say, well, I remember this one guy, he had great parents and he went in and done this. And I said, yeah, but that's 1 out of 100. Let's talk about the 99 who had good parents and and made it. It's the same way when you're talking about people who live in a high poverty area and one person makes it out. Yeah, but what about the 99 who didn't make it out? Well, let's figure out why that is that 99 didn't make it out.
Yes.
And I think that's where, and people don't understand that, because the same people I were locking up back when I was a rookie officer and patrolling the streets and putting bad people in jail, well, now we're locking up their kids and grandkids. So it's like a big cycle.
That's horrible, isn't
And it's
it?
horrible. And it's some of the same houses. We go to some of the same houses that I used to go to, and I'll look and I'll be like, oh, I remember his dad, or I remember his uncle. I can remember this case, and then I'll start talking about a case that I was aware of. And I was like, and we're now, 20 years later, we're going right back. Different person, same arrest, same family, same situation. So that's tough, and it's tough as a law enforcement officer when you have to repeatedly go back to those places and deal with the same kids and stuff like that. Because I can tell you, it gets frustrating when you put a kid in and you got good evidence and he done a shooting and he shot into whatever, let's say a bar, and you do the work, y'all got him, y'all put him in jail, put him in custody. He goes down to DJJ, and then 4 days later you see him walking down the street and you're like, what's he doing out here? And then you pull up beside him like, what are you doing here? Oh, they let me out. And it can be just frustrating. And especially if you end up, the day he's out, there's another shooting, and it just so happens it kind of relates to what he's already done. And then you go to your house and you say, hey, where you at? Where was you at during this time? And then, of course, mom gets upset and says, you're always blaming my kid. So there's a lot to it, other than just, some people are bad and some people are good. There's so much dynamics.
What about the emotional effects on police officers?
I think it's tremendous. I think there's a lot of it that people don't see, and I always give an example. It wasn't long ago, one of my officers went to a call at the Publix, and it was in reference to a woman's card wouldn't work. And why they called the police, I don't know, but I guess she was nervous and didn't know what to do. And I think that she thought somebody might have stole her card because it wouldn't work. So the officer got there, talks to her and everything, and, finds out, this is just something that's wrong with the machine or whatever. So the officer pays for her food and tells her, oh, don't worry about it. And the officer never tells anybody about it. I wouldn't even known about it if the person wouldn't have called me and told me, hey, your officer, this is what they did. And I hear those stories all the time. And it's never from the officers. It's always from people out there. I do the same thing. There's a lemonade stand. Officer went and bought everybody on the shift to go by there and pick up lemonades and stuff for them. So there's so much out there that I don't think people see. And the emotional part, that's the roughest part. And I think it's more rough probably on the families of these officers.
Right.
And a lot of people don't see that. It takes a special, when I give awards out and stuff, I always ask them to bring their family up there because it's never just one person. It takes a lot to be a first responder spouse.
I'm sure it does. Absolutely.
So very emotional. It can have a lot, and that's why we team with some of our specialized people that specialize in mental health and stuff like that to make sure, because we definitely don't want a bad officer out here that's going through a lot of drama. But we also have what we call alerts. So if you're an officer and you have a couple uses of forces, then it sends me an alert saying this officer's had 3 uses of forces in 7 days. So then I want to look and say, okay, let's take a little deeper dive into why this is. Is it because legitimately we've had, he just ran into some bad people and he had to use force, or is it he's got a lot going on somewhere else and he might be a little too high strung to be on the road, and he might not have that de-escalation technique and understanding how to talk to people because he's got something in his personal life and now he's letting it come over to the professional life. So a lot of those things is what we depend on too. And that's the great thing about technology, because anytime a lot of this happens, I get alerts. So we want to make sure we're looking at them. Even though you have 4 supervisors look at a use of force before it gets to me, still you have the fact that we want the alerts. That way I can look and say, okay, this is unusual. This officer's been here 3 years, never had a use of force, and now all of a sudden this week he has 3. So let's look and see if there's something more to it other than just him using force on somebody.
Absolutely. Well, as far as the youth and the violence, do you see that do you think this is going to be trending up this year? What do you think? I know that county council just took the fentanyl money and they are looking at doing a program over there at Stars 24 that they're going to try to be getting some of these young people off the streets. But I don't know if those things actually help that much.
It's such a. I tell people it's wild because I can always remember being a mentor when I was doing community service back in 2002, 2003, and I was assigned to a young adult, and I'd always tell people, I spend 2 hours with him here, 2 hours with him there, but guess where he's at the rest of the time? He's back in that same environment around the same people, and there's no way I can get out of that, right?
Right.
Unless we move him out of that environment, there's no way to get around that, and it's just hard. I don't know if there's one program, that's kind of a fix-all. It's great for the young people to have something to do, but at the same time, if you drive up on Saturday night to the movie theater in that area around there, you'll see 20, 30 young juvenile kids running around up there, and you're like, where's the parents? What's going on here? And they're not going to the movie or going to Wendy's or any of those other places. They're just hanging out.
Right.
And as soon as that happens, the next thing you know, you're getting a call because they're fighting, they're screaming, they're yelling, doing all that stuff. And some of it's not that bad, but we have taken guns and we had a shooting up there because 2 juveniles got into it. So those are things that I think, there needs to be places people can go, but there also has to be more to it other than just we're going to give kids a place to go. We got to have role models. We've got to have good educational programs, and it's got to start at home. It really does.
I guess then the question that I would ask you, that I know you probably don't have the answer, how do we train our parents to be parents?
I'm just a police officer.
I knew you wouldn't have the answer to that one. Yeah.
I raised 3 kids. I don't know if my 3 kids would tell you I did it right or not.
but that really is where it has to start, and we have to break the cycle.
Absolutely.
And I don't think anybody has figured out how to really break the cycle.
Yeah. And if there was a magical wand, I think we would have already figured that out, and everybody would be using it. And I just don't think there's a magical wand. There's a lot of different roles that come into play when you're dealing with why people do certain things. And, young people, and I'm assuming it's still the same way, but I can always remember that I always say a young person's, brain don't fully develop until they're 25, so there's a lot to play with, a lot of issues, but I know we definitely are going to have to do something about, how they're getting the guns in their hands and stuff like that, because it was different back in the old days when they were doing minor stuff and just being a little pain. Now you're talking about them firing weapons for no reason other than somebody saying something negative to them.
But adults are doing the same thing, TJ. I mean,
But a lot of those adults are also 18, 19, 20, 21.
Right.
So it kind of plays that whole thing. And I always tell people what's crazy is usually by the time we charge somebody with an attempted murder, if you start looking at their criminal history, it's led up to it the whole time. I mean, since they, we got 17 and 18-year-olds that we've got 60-something reports of law enforcement encounters with by the time they turn 18. And
that's horrible.
And I know most people don't even come in contact with the police 4 or 5 times. If it is, it's on a speeding or traffic violation.
Right.
So it kind of tells you, it's a rotating system on each front, not only on the front where the family members are continuing to cycle out, but also our system is a continuous cycle.
Absolutely. Well, when we come back, we want to talk about. We're going to take a quick break here. We want to talk about what is the difference between criminal matters and some civil matters, because there seems to be a lot of discussion about how far the police can go and what their role actually is when it comes to civil matters. Civil matters are civil matters, but we're going to talk about it here with Police Chief TJ Chaudion. We also are going to take your calls if you've got a question. 864-332-9355, 864-332-9355. So you stay right with us. We will be right back. This is WCRS Radio. Take it away.
It's awesome.
Trashy Lake Greenwood or pristine Lake Greenwood? The choice is yours, Greenwood. Your opportunity to keep Lake Greenwood beautiful is in your hands. Join us on Saturday, March 14th for the really big annual Lake Greenwood cleanup. Donate yours and your family's time. All supplies provided for the cleanup, and yes, there is a free lunch. When? Saturday, March 14th, 9 to 12. Register at our Facebook page, Keep Greenwood County Beautiful, or our website, keepgcb.com. Free lunch provided by Break on the Lake, Papa John's, Chick-fil-A, and Pepsi of Greenville. Be the solution, Greenwood, not the pollution.
There's no place like this place anywhere.
Hey, did you see Bob? He just tried a yoga class, upside down.
And Jane just swam 10 laps while juggling her water bottle.
Somehow, I feel like I belong here.
You do. This is the Greenwood YMCA, where everyone's having fun and everybody knows your name.
There's no place like this place anywhere. Come join the fun and make 2026 the year you belong. At the Greenwood YMCA, there's no place like this place.
At Greenwood Pathway House, we are a Christian ministry that helps people make changes in their life so that they can overcome homelessness permanently. Helping those who were living in Greenwood or Abbeville County at the time they became homeless, we provide residents with the support and training they need to build functional lives, obtain employment, and move into their own homes. Visit our website at gwdpathway.org or call us at 223-4460 to learn how you can make Greenwood and Abbeville stronger by helping people from our area overcome homelessness.
Oh, that's right. We're right back here this afternoon with Police Chief TJ Chaudion. We did have a question come on Facebook Live. We're on Facebook Live. We're also on the radio. And yes, if you have a question or a comment you'd like to make, 864-332-9355. And of course, if you're on Facebook, you can also put a question there. Mr. Langford here says, how does the department communicate urgent safety information to residents?
Yeah, well, it depends on exactly what the urgency is, because we'll do the reverse 911, we'll do all the social media platforms, we'll send out on city and the county website. So it would depend on exactly what it was. So let's say it's a missing person, an elderly person that has dementia. So a lot of times we'll send out what's called a reverse 911, and they'll send a message to your phone saying, hey, look, we got a missing person in this area, this is the description, or if we got a picture, this is what he looks like, whatever. And that there's drones up in the air, there's dogs on the ground, so just be aware and let us know if you see anything.
Now that's interesting with the drones. Yeah, you know what? Those drones make a little noise, though, don't they?
Yes, they do.
They do, because I had a couple of your guys that were looking for something, and they were parked over here, and you could hear this little whirling type noise.
Yes. Yeah. So it depends on how high they fly it, because
right.
we have two different types of drones. Each one of our shifts has a drone, and that's just for the shift to deploy, so if it's an emergency deployment. Then we have a big drone that's operated in our major cases, like if you doing search warrant somewhere, you put the drone up so it can watch the area before you hit the house and stuff like that. So it kind of just depends. But our smaller drones, they actually have lights on it, so it has the blue lights that flick on and off, so just let people know that this is a police drone. But for the most part, most people, when it's the big one, no one has any idea that it's even up. But the small ones, they do, because usually that's just a rapid deployment. Somebody jumped out of a car and ran or something like that. Or they get a call about a missing kid. Instead of waiting for the big one to go up, they'll just rapidly deploy the one that's right there. It still has some of the same features, like the heat signature and all that stuff, and they're able to talk back and forth, and it has an alarm sound on it. So there's a lot of stuff they can do even with the small ones. But you can get that one up a lot quicker. But I don't think people realize the amount of things that we have to go through, because we're all FAA certified, so we have to send a flight plan anytime we're putting up any of the drones.
For anything?
For anything.
You can't just throw it out there and
Absolutely
say go.
Not. It's first they had to go to a class, so they had to be certified. So
right.
They had to get their certificate and all that, and that was probably a thing that some of them said it was the toughest class they've been to. So I think it just, a lot of people don't understand all the dynamics that comes behind it. But yeah, anything like that we would put up. And if it was something like, let's say Helene or something serious about the weather, if we had to, we would put the cars through neighborhoods and do the loudspeaker over the loudspeaker. Hey, we're having an emergency. This is happening. Please be on your advised. So but most of it's going to go through social media, our news media, and then our reverse 911 system.
Okay. Well, that was a question that came in. I hope that answered that question.
That was a good question.
Absolutely. So now, this thing with the difference between where can the police get involved and where can the police not get involved, because something is really a civil issue versus a criminal issue. How does that break down?
Well, and I think a lot of people, that's a lot of confusion, is civil and criminal. The police department itself, we don't deal with civil issues. We only deal with the criminal side. However, most of our calls are usually civil. Usually there's nothing that's been a violation of law. So there's a statute on the criminal, and that has to meet that statute and those elements of that crime. And and if it's case law, then of course it has to follow the case law that we have on the books. So a lot of us, if you and your neighbors arguing, and that's just arguing because over a property line, we get a lot of that, of neighbors not getting along. It's a civil matter between neighbors, and it's unfortunate because some neighbors really can't get along, and I mean they really do hate each other. And sometimes neighbors ag it on, but also they don't put it to the point of we can actually arrest them for something criminal. It could get to harassment, which would be a charge we would look at. But a lot of times people get confused because we'll say it's a civil issue and they'll say, no, it's a violation of law. So usually what I do in those situations is I'll take the case and I'll let our local judge, look at it, see what he says. Then I'll go to our solicitor's office or our city attorney. So it's not just that it stops with us just because we say it's civil. We're always looking to make sure, hey, will you double check to make sure we're looking at this the same way? So will you take a look at this case and tell me what your thoughts? And a lot of people get confused with that because they think that, oh, if we say it's civil, then it's civil. It don't matter what anybody else says, and we've never had a case where we've said it's civil and somebody say I don't think that's accurate, and we just say we say it's civil. It's civil. We always take the case to some higher up and let different people look at it, in different positions. Because if we do charge somebody with a criminal act, it's going to be the 8th Circuit solicitor or it's going to be our city prosecutor that's going to prosecute the case. So it's very important to get their way in, and of course, it's always important to get the judge's way in and say, do you think this meets, a crime? And, so it gets very tough. We deal with a lot more civil stuff, once we get there and figure out civil, than most of our criminal cases. But at the same time, there's always just a fine line because you might not be getting along with your neighbors and it's civil, but if you take a rock and throw it over there and hit their house, now you turned it into a criminal act. So that's where it starts changing. And civil court's dealt with in magistrate. Now, people have the right to sue anybody if they want to sue for any reason they want, and that happens all the time. But it never goes to the city. Like municipal court don't deal with that. It's always dealt with through the magistrate's office.
So, and I would presume even employee issues could be civil, not necessarily criminal.
Yeah, it just depends. You have to look. Every case is going to be a little different. So the facts of the case is the most important thing. What I tell people is, if you feel like it's not, if you feel like, look, this is not civil, I believe it's criminal, and then you try to pull some crazy statute out of the air that may or may not apply. I have no problem taking any case to the solicitor's office, and David would back me on this, and Yates, and I'm always up to, I want to make sure that other people are aware. So let's make sure we get it right. The most important thing to do is get it right. We owe that to the citizen. Now, if you got the 8th Circuit solicitor says it's a civil matter, you got the city attorney says it's a civil matter, the judge says, I'm not going to issue a warrant for that. I don't know of anything else we can do.
Right.
And unfortunately, it still makes people upset because sometimes it is a civil issue and they are out of money, especially when it's like you talk about employees, bad employees, doing bad stuff, conning, their employers. Or it's the same way when you have some of these nursing homes that try to con some of these elder people out of, money and
abuse,
stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that it's every case is a little different, but we always take it to our different levels. It'll start out with me, would be the officer would make the decision, and then of course if somebody said I don't complain, then of course I look at it, or my major over detectives looks at it, and then we'll go down the line to make sure everybody's looked at it and we're all on the same page. Okay, this is civil. There's nothing we can do.
So okay, in a criminal court of law, yes, a criminal complaint, we know how it's going to go, right? It's going to go, person's going to be arrested most likely, and down that route. But in a civil issue, what is the protocol?
Yeah, it's just that, so what happens is the sheriff's department delivers all civil papers. So if you was to file a civil suit against someone, you'll go up to the magistrate's office, you'll file the paperwork. They will then serve it on the person, and they'll give a court date. And then you and that person will show up to court, and then you'll present your case to the judge, and then the judge will decide whether or not there should be any type of, money given out, or whatever the judge feels.
So is that like a small claim? Is that up to a certain size?
Yeah. And then there's always a chance that you can have the jury trial, even in a civil court. But it's the same way it goes. It's the big difference is in criminal court you have to be found beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the bottom line. To be convicted of something, you have to be found beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil court, it's not like that. It's way lower than that. It's like preponderance of evidence and reasonable person with so it's not. There's not as much to have to prove in civil court as they are in criminal court. And that's where it gets a little sticky too, because when you tell people you got a great civil case, because I think that even if you took this to court, you're going to win a civil case, but there's nothing criminal we can do. And people get upset about that, and I don't know if there's anything we can do other than the channels we got. But it's unfortunate for them because, we want to protect our business owners. I mean, that's one of the most important parts. That keeps our city going. Without our businesses, we wouldn't be able to survive. But also, and very importantly, is we have to protect the rights of citizens. And, and that's making sure that we're going by the Constitution and we're enforcing the laws as the legislation put them in.
Sure. So, that was one of the questions that had come in here this afternoon. So that's good to get that one. So, so police have to step back and say, you've got a civil case. They cannot do anything more other than say, I'm sorry, this is the direction you need to go.
Correct. We just provide them with information of how to go about the civil part. And a lot of times we'll do a report just so they'll have a report on file. So, and it still will say, this person called and said that, hey, this happened, that happened. So we do a report, and then we usually even talk to the person, even if it's civil, and say, hey, this person's accusing you of this. And if they say no, then we just document it. The person, denied he did any of that. And so
it just becomes a record.
It just becomes a record, but it's a record that they can have on file, so they can say, I called the police, and this is the way they told me to go.
Right. So, and it doesn't. You can actually, literally, in those type of cases, you can represent yourself.
Absolutely.
It's not that I think people sometimes think, well, if we can get a criminal case here, it's not going to cost me any money, right?
Yeah. And you can represent yourself, and and just because it's a criminal case, that don't mean that the judge is going to rule that the person has to pay back a certain amount of money that the person might be out of.
Right.
So that's a lot of it too, because I've seen even criminal courts say, well, you need to take them to civil court for that. I'm not going to put that in here, as part of my findings. So it kind of just, it's up in there. It's always about the specifics of the case. That's the most important part, the specifics, because you can have two cases almost similar, but there'll be one little thing that's a little different that then turns it to criminal.
Sure, exactly. Well, that is a big issue, and I think it is difficult for people to understand, particularly when people are upset about the fact that something has happened.
Absolutely. When you're a victim, and you can be a victim of a criminal offense, or you can be a victim of a civil offense, you're still a victim.
Right.
And and it's still, it's like I tell people when people say something, this my job, this is how I support my family, this is how I take care of my family. So it's very important that people understand that. So when you try to interfere with the way I protect my family, the way I feed my family, the way I provide for my family, then people take that personally. And if I owned a business and somebody was taken from that business, whether it be criminal or civil, depending on how it came about, then I would be very upset, regardless of whether criminal charges or civil charges were filed. It's unfortunately that we have a system. It's not a perfect system, but the system's in place for those reasons, to make sure, because you can't just. Everybody can't go to jail because you hurt somebody's feelings or you took advantage of somebody. A lot of times, those taking advantage of people is not criminal, unless you're doing it in a way like some of the things we've seen, like the nurse, going in and taking money, having the old person, sure. Hey, let me have a couple $100s, and even though she's saying, well, I was just borrowing it, but he's in a nursing home and he don't have the capabilities of being able to do that.
Mental facilities, but he can sign a check. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right,
so that has a lot to do with that too. So it always depends, but civil and criminal is always major things. And again, some of it's civil because it didn't meet one element of a crime. Maybe there's 4 elements to a crime. It met 3 elements, but it don't have the 4th. So then there's nothing we can do. So you're going to have to go the civil route.
Yeah. So, TJ, how as far as staffing and everything is our police department? I know in the past we've had issues with that. What is the staffing?
Well, we're very fortunate. I mean, we're getting a lot better applicants, than we've got in the past. The way when I look at applications, I look at them and I'm like, okay, this guy, prior military, college degree, something like that, something that stands out other than I'm 24 and I've not done nothing. So I just decided all of a sudden I want to be a police officer. But they've actually done something, so they have a little bit of life. They're married, maybe have kids, because, as bad as you don't want to say it, but, if you got a single person that likes to go to sports break every Friday night, and drink and be around people, those are not the type of people that we want as police officers, because if you're around that, eventually something's going to happen. So we're doing good. I will say we were very lucky that council stepped up. The mayor and council stepped up, and they actually gave us some more positions. So we're in the process of trying to fill those positions this year, and hopefully we'll get those filled. So this is the first time that they've approved positions since I've been chief. So we're very fortunate for that, and they do a good job of. One of the most important things for us is the officers that we have is making sure they're properly trained. They go through the proper training. So we have a lot of instructors that attend a lot of classes on different aspects of law enforcement, and we're very fortunate that the county or city council and the mayor gives us that amount of funds to be able to do that.
Okay. Now, we just had a question come in. The up there out of Belton, Thomas and Turner Boutique, that the question is that a criminal or a civil case?
So whoever done it put me on the spot.
Yes.
So let me tell you. So I'm going to tell you from the city, because I can only tell you the cases that we have. Right. So the city currently has warrants on that young lady, and we're waiting to bring her to Greenwood. The city does. And I think we had 2 reported cases, and we found there was enough criminal acts and it met the elements that we issued a warrant. So technically she has current warrants on her right now. So, and currently I think she's supposed to come in tomorrow and turn herself in. So she'll be up here tomorrow and she'll be arrested tomorrow on the city's charges. I'm not sure about the county. It'd be silly for me to comment on them, because I don't even know if they got it, if anybody's even reported in cases to the county. But the 2 that has been reported to us that occurred into the city, meaning that they're residents in the city and that they took at their home, they did the actual transaction while they were here in the city. So we had to have jurisdiction, right? So that's how we determine it. Sometimes people will call and say, I went up there and I tried to buy something, and I said, well, you need to go to Belton, because that's who needs to do that, because it was done in person. But if you live in the city and it was done in the city, then technically we're responsible. And if there's enough, and in her case, there's enough. There's more than enough, in my opinion. And I can only count on the 2 cases that we have. But I've read the 2 cases that we have, and there is no ifs and buts about it that she was wrong, and she probably knows what she did wrong. And hopefully tomorrow she will be booked with our department. And but yeah, she currently has active warrants with Greenwood City.
Wow. Well, there you go. There's another question here this afternoon, answered by TJ Chaudion.
You made me answer that question before I was ready to do my press release. I just
Well, you heard it first right here on WCRS.
I promise you heard it first here.
Okay, all right. Well, that's great. I love getting a scoop here. Getting a scoop here. All right. So I know that you've always been a strong believer in community policing.
Absolutely.
And what does that look like in Greenwood today? I know that I believe you're going to tell us you've made a lot of progress in that. I know you've got that gaming place that gaming trailer you like to sit in and play with the games and everything. But how is that working?
I always use, and I'm going to use Phoenix Place Apartments as an example. Phoenix Place Apartment was giving us one of the worst shooting places that we had in Greenwood. And this was a few years back. So we took the gaming trailer and we used it down there all the time. We done the popcorn, we done the movies, and we done all that. And for that year, we didn't have no shootings down there. Now, it's not just us. It's working with the community, working with the people who live there, working with the management. There's a lot more to it than just
it's called
us.
Community policing,
but
right? Yes.
It's about working together and trying to come to that same objective, and that's to stop the crime. And so it works well. we still have a long ways to go, but we also have a lot to do on our side. I think with technology getting better, that also helps because, so many people now, because they're affordable, have the Ring cameras and the cameras at their houses. So we're able to track, let's say if an incident happened on one street, then we find out, okay, which way did the person go after he left there? And then we're just tracking it from house or road and to anybody that's got cameras. And there's a lot more people that have cameras, and there's a lot more businesses that have cameras that cover the outside of their business now. So that helps too. But community policing is always a big one for us. And I think it does good for the officers. We talk about your mental stuff. So a lot of times we have officers, hey, you're gonna do this. We need you to go down there. And officers get to see something different because you come here for 12 hours and 99% of the time, every call you go to is not a good call. Somebody is not happy and they're calling you because they want you to settle it, and they want you to settle it the way they want you to settle it.
Right.
So
you can't win. You can't win.
You can't win. So you have to go in there and you have to understand that. So whenever we get to go in and we have to do shot with a cop, which is such a big thing for us, or we do, the polar plunge or any of the other events that we do, it's such a great time because if you see the looks on those kids' faces, and most of them that come in, they're in some type of foster care. They have issues, right? They're being raised by grandmother. They're being raised by a family member.
Thank God they do have those grandparents.
Thank God for that.
Right.
But when you see the look on their face, and usually we give them like $250 or $300 that they can spend, and then they have a couple of officers that go with them, and they just go through the Walmart. To see the look on their faces, it just tears you to pieces. And I love it. I always think that's one of the greatest things we do every year because just the look on their faces. But then also I watch the officers, and they're running around with the kid, and they're riding the cart, and I'm like, it's like there's three kids.
They're not even adults at that point.
It's like three kids instead of one. And I love it, and I love to see them doing it, and I just think it just brings a great thing. And it helps them mentally. They realize we're not always out here just to put people in jail. There's a lot more to this job. And, the best, especially if you've been in this career a while, is one of the best things that ever happened to me is somebody that was on drugs that I gave a break to one time and told him if he went and got help, I'd drop the charges on him. And he's still in Greenwood, still works with some of the local Pathway House and charities here. And when he came up to me and said, I just want to thank you because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. That's probably one of the greatest gifts you'll ever get as a law enforcement officer. I think that's probably why we do this job. So, and it definitely helps you want to do more and more.
Well, it takes special people to be in law enforcement and to do that. It definitely does. And thank goodness that we have people like
yes, ma'am.
that.
And some of our biggest critics, I always say, well, I don't ever see your name on applications because we're hiring. We just about always got at least one opening, but I don't ever see you put in an application.
But it is tough, and I think it's really tough. You said you like to have officers that have families and everything, but it's also really tough on them to have
Very
a family.
tough. Very tough.
And to come home and maybe they've had a rotten day and come home and you're supposed to switch gears. That has to be very tough.
Absolutely. Probably some of the worst things. And we sometimes will put classes together for spouses and stuff. So we'll have somebody come in and teach a class to our spouses or girlfriends or whoever.
Significant others. There you go.
And be able to talk about some of the stressors that we see as law enforcement officers and how that relates to them. Because there's some horrible stories out there about marriages that's really had bad stuff happen because the officer didn't know how to turn that off. So when he got home, he was still an officer, and you can't be that way. When you're at home, you have to be the husband, the father. You can't be the police officer.
Right.
We don't need you to.
And it's hard to turn that switch off.
It's hard because you're so used to it and your mind is so protective. And I tell people all the time, people always wonder, I don't understand why the officer did this or why he did that. And I'm always like, number one thing that we always teach our officers is officer safety. So when you see an officer and they're looking around and they're doing different stuff, it's always probably part of their training. And what the questions they ask, I tell people all the time, I said, the funniest thing is most people admit that they did a crime before they ever realize it. Whenever you pull somebody over speeding, the first thing the officer says is, hey, why are you going so fast? And most people say, I wasn't paying attention. And then now he done got you to admit that you either didn't know you were speeding or you knew you were speeding. So I always tell people, just give them your license. Don't say nothing. Here, sir.
Well, let's see. We just had another comment come in here this evening. James Long just said law enforcement is essential.
Yes.
Essential, and it
Yep.
is an essential service.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about law enforcement, I think this has been a great conversation here this afternoon, TJ. I really appreciate you coming in.
I come in anytime you need me to.
Well, it's been great this afternoon. Now, how about you have a meeting coming up? I think
tomorrow night.
Yes,
tomorrow night we got. So we start off with our community meetings, and basically we started that last year, and it's community meetings with. It's called Community Meetings with the Chief, and it just gives me an opportunity to go to every ward. We have 6 wards, so I get to go to every ward, and we have a meeting somewhere in that location, and the people of that ward come out. And if you don't live in that ward, anybody can come out, but usually it's the people of that ward. They come out, and it gives them a chance to meet me, to ask me questions, to us to go over stuff, for me to explain to them a little bit about the police department. And I'm very fortunate that the council member and our city manager actually goes with me to these too. So it really turns into a community meeting with the chief, the city manager, and the council member, right, or the mayor. And so those are important, because I tell people all the time, if I don't get out there and speak to the people, then I don't ever know what the complaints are, because every neighborhood it's different.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. Every neighborhood can have different
Correct.
Issues.
And so it's important that I know and able to explain them. So if their issue is with grass, their neighbor not cutting their grass, then at least I can pull them the same way. Or there's an abandoned car or something like that. Because one of the things that was brought to my attention at one of these meetings last year was one of our streets had like 6 or 7 just like broken down cars on it. And it was a dead end street, so you go down, turn around, you come out. But it was like 6 or 7 cars. So we went down there the next day and we marked all of them and we towed every one of them. And this helps with crime. You don't want that type of stuff in these neighborhoods. But a lot of that, I wasn't aware of it until somebody brought it to my attention. But we were able to get those cars and move them out of the way and get them towed. So tomorrow we're going to be at the Mount Tabor Baptist Church, 2102 East Cambridge Avenue. It starts at 6 p.m., but we would love anybody and everybody to come out. I love meeting new people, especially, and I love talking to the ones I've talked to, seem like all the time. So either way, come on out. That's Mr. Dean's ward, so Mr. Dean will be there tomorrow night, and Miss Julie, I think, is going to be there tomorrow night. So we'll all be there, and the mayor, he usually tries to come to all of them, so he'll probably be there.
How about the police dog?
We can blame the police dog. I mean, we some might not want a police dog there.
Right, yeah.
But no, because we use, all of our dogs we use. It's such a good tool when you're dealing with our schools and stuff, and you're dealing with kids, and and being able to meet the dog and see the dog act. That we don't have bite dogs with the city of Greenwood. Any dog will bite, but our dogs are not trained to be bite dogs. All of our dogs are trained article narcotics tracking, because we want to be able to take them into schools and not worry about, we want kids, because kids are going to want to touch a dog. As soon as they see a dog, they don't understand, So we want to make sure that they're able to do that, and that the canine handler is able to enjoy that time and that interaction with them. So we get a lot of good publicity and very good working relationships with our schools with our dogs.
Absolutely. Well, TJ, we're about to finish up here. Is there anything you'd like to say here as we close out here this afternoon?
No, please continue to follow us on Facebook and our social media sites, because we put a lot of information of things that we're doing. We're currently in the middle of our county city food drive, and I think Hodges Volunteer Fire Department, we're going to have to go up there and do something with them, because they're trying to put it on us this year again. They got us last year.
I'm telling you, the city, Brandon was on here last week with Robbie, and Brandon threw it down. He threw it down. The city is going to come through. So I don't know what you guys are going to do over there.
I think we're going to have to put up some speed traps, and we're going to have to stop the Hodges Volunteer Fire Department, because I'm starting to see them everywhere. We're going to have to do something law enforcement to them.
All right, right. Okay, we had another comment come in tonight. Leslie Lane, your work is greatly appreciated. It's so refreshing to see a unified city government run by people who truly care about our community.
Thank you so much. That's very important. But, and I tell people all the time, I work for the citizens. That's my boss. Even though Julie is technically my boss, I answer to our citizens, and that's why I love these community meetings, and they're so much fun for me. And they're not always positive, There's some negative that comes out of them, but those are things that we need to know because we're not going to get better if we're not able to help them try to fix those negative problems.
Absolutely. Well, it sure has been great to have you here this afternoon, and we are going to say adieu. We're going to say put the curtain down and let TJ go home to his wife and kids, and have a good night, TJ.
Thank you so much, Ann. Thanks you for having us.
This has been a great afternoon meeting right here on Meet Me at the Diner with TJ Chaudion. I am Ann Eller, and yes, I'm out of here. I'll be back in the morning. You should go back and see the show we did this morning about the county meeting last night. There was a lot of good information there, so just FYI, if you have a chance, you can see it on Facebook, WCRS, and by tomorrow it'll be on our website too, so that's WCRS1450am.net. Let's drop the curtain. Cue the music, and thank you everybody for tuning in this afternoon. Bye-bye, everybody.